Sabretooth is currently serving out his prison sentence in the pits of Krakoa, which he was exiled to way back in House of X number 6 after breaking the law of Krakoa, murder no man. The Quiet Council made an example of him, showing all the mutants on Krakoa that life is generally safe for them here, just not if they break any of the laws. As it turns out, Sabretooth isn't serving his sentence alone, and in his brand new series, he and we were surprised to see a bunch of new recruits suddenly join him down there in the pit. Necra, MADISON Jeffries, Oya, Melter, and Third Eye have all apparently also broken laws of Krakoa, and they were judged, juried, and executionered by the Quiet Council to have to hang out with Sabes until such a time as deemed by the Council that they can come back out, if ever. Basically, it's like they're being grounded by their parents, and in this case, it's quite literal, because the pit is, after all, underground. In this series of videos, I'm giving a brief who's who of all these new pit recruits and theorizing about what laws were broken by them and what crimes they might have committed. And truly, one of the most surprising people for me to see in this group is none other than the box man himself, Mr. MADISON Jeffries. I'm a pretty big fan of MADISON Jeffries and his distinguished gray side hairs, and he's one of at least two super heroic characters here, the other being Oya, so it's quite a shock to see him sentenced into the pit. It really begs the question, what the hell did he do to end up here? Which, fortunately, is exactly what we're here to speculate on. MADISON is most well known for having been a member of the Canadian superhero team Alpha Flight. I'm also a pretty big Alpha Flight fan, and even though it has its own legs and identity apart from the X franchise as a series, I will always consider Alpha Flight more of like a spin-off book from the X-Men. Most of the core cast of characters from that team have really deep ties with like Wolverine or the X community at large, like the Hudsons and Snowbird and Puck, and of course Northstar and Aurora. MADISON wasn't part of this first wave of Alphans as we know them, but he was a member of Gamma Flight, which was kind of like Alpha Flight's version of New Mutants, where people trained to one day, hopefully, graduate into the main Alpha Flight level. MADISON served as the flight's resident tech smith for a while, helping to repair technology and serve as like a one-man danger room for them, until he finally joined the Alphans full-time as the second Box. Very creative codename. In one of his first missions, he had to fight his own brother who had mutated into like a monster and who was trying to harvest Alpha Flight's genetic material. He ended up killing his brother and in the process, killing the original Box as well. As a member of Alpha Flight, MADISON went fist to fist with the great beast Tundra, fought the villainous Dream Queen, and even had to dismantle his own box armor after it was possessed. He was romantically involved with the team's leader, Heather Hudson, insofar as to even become engaged to her, but the whole thing blew up after he started two-timing her with their teammate, Diamond Lil, who he ended up marrying instead. Oof. Together, he and Lil kind of retired from Alpha Flight, though he would sneak out at night and answer Alpha Flight's calls for help, much to Lil's displeasure. Later on, when Alpha Flight reformed under a different regime, MADISON rejoined it, but he was captured by the Zodiac and became brainwashed into becoming one of their new Gemini members. He fought his former teammates, and it looked like he would never regain his own mind again until the Zodiac's base was ransacked and he was kidnapped and brought to the new Weapon X program. There, MADISON was manipulated even more, and he was tricked into helping to design the Neverland mutant concentration camp, complete with sentinels fashioned out of his old box armor. At the time, he didn't know that he was actually being used to imprison and to kill his fellow mutants, including his wife Diamond Lil, and it wasn't until M-Day struck and most of the world's mutants lost their X genes that the program was finally shut down. This is really when MADISON's formal involvement with the world of the X-Men began. MADISON was holed up in an old factory in Canada, fighting against his machines that had become self-aware and trying to mentally heal himself after realizing the role he played in the Neverland death camp fiasco. Beast and some people tracked him down with a proposition, and he agreed to travel to San Francisco, where he joined the brand spanking new X-Men science division called the X Club. Together, these super scientists tasked themselves with trying to find a way to undo the demutanting effects of M-Day, so they traveled back in time to hopefully score some first-generation mutant stem cells that might do the trick, but it didn't give them the answers they were hoping for. The X-Club were also the ones responsible for raising Magneto's fallen asteroid M from the bottom of the ocean and stationing it in the San Francisco Bay as the sovereign mutant nation Utopia. On Utopia, Madison was never without work, as he was often seen tweaking and fixing things and occasionally fighting giant monsters. He reconciled with his estranged wife Diamond Lil after she moved to Utopia, but unfortunately, the reconciliation wouldn't last, as she was one of Selene's victims during the Necrotia storyline after she was killed by Dazzler's sister Mortis. Madison had an emotional send-off for her, and he put her in a glass box and sent her off to sea. From there, Madison's exploits with the X-Club continued. He helped to locate the giant space bullet that Kitty Pryde was trapped in and bring it back down to Earth where they could free her from it. As a result of her bullet adventure, Kitty was stuck in her intangible state for a while, and Madison and the club tried to help her regain her solid form, but nothing they did ever seemed to do the trick. Madison was also often seen in the sickbay area around this time, and when he wasn't working on the Kitty situation, he was usually helping Karma out with her brand new cybernetic leg, which he thought was rather sexy on her. The X-Club also took part in the big Second Coming storyline, which saw the reintroduction of Hope into the X franchises. The X-Club was sent to investigate Bastion's oil brig, but it ended up being a trap for them, and they were ambushed by Graydon Creed, who wanted them to recreate Kavita Rao's mutant cure serum. Luckily, they managed to trick Graydon, and they escaped the oil rig just in time to help the Avengers try to break into Bastion's big red bubble that covered San Francisco. Madison was also front and center for when the Vampire Nation went to war with the mutants after trying to convert the entire population of San Francisco into vampires via a vampire virus. The X-Club captured one of the vampires and were using it to try to find a cure, but it escaped, and before long, Madison himself became infected with the vampirism. He tried to kill himself before he was fully converted, but his mutant power over machinery wouldn't let him, so he begged Dr. Rao to do it for him before it was too late. Luckily, the club realized the infection was happening on a psychic level, and Emma was able to purge the influence before Dr. Rao pulled the trigger, freeing Madison from the vampiric thrall. He continued playing in a support role for the X-Men, but occasionally his technical exploits drummed up more trouble than they were worth for the X-Men, like when he accidentally sent a bunch of them into the negative zone, or when he was fiddling around with a ghost box and a giant squid monster grabbed Dazzler and sent her through a series of alternate dimensions, or when he and Rogue uncovered a different squid-like monster that had somehow made its way here from M-Plate's sideways dimension and they had to fight it. When the Evolutionaries threatened to kill Cyclops and the X-Men, Madison and the X-Club were tasked with building a device that could stop them, but before they could finish, they were ambushed by Litterbug and Dragoness, who were working with Toad to take control of Utopia while the X-Men were all preoccupied fighting the Evolutionaries. Lucky for the X-Club, the Academy X-Kids were here to save them, and they fought with Litterbug and Dragoness while Madison activated the device and most of the Evolutionaries were destroyed. During the X-Men Schism event, Madison and the X-Club were on the front lines trying to fight the Super Sentinel that was on its way to destroy Utopia, but not even Madison's technopathy could stop it. After the Schism, the X-Club chose to remain in Utopia with Cyclops, where they could continue doing their science-related business. This is when Madison started feeling attracted to the sentient Shi'ar robot Danger. Phantom X caught Madison checking out her schematics and encouraged him to ask her out on a date, which he kind of did, and the two of them shared a romantic picnic together. Then, during a space mission gone wrong, where Madison was paired to work with Danger, she had a bad interface with one of the computers and ended up getting pregnant with a malicious AI. Madison had to sort out his own feelings about this, and he couldn't really explain the attraction and jealousy he felt about the situation, but he helped her through the evil pregnancy, and then the two of them shared their first romantic kiss together. That was really his big last moment with the X-Men. He was present during the Avengers vs. X-Men event, though he didn't really have any standout scenes other than helping Tigra to chaperone the Academy X kids after they were shipped off to the Avengers Academy for safekeeping, which many of the kids equated to feeling like they were being grounded. Sebastian Shaw was also being held there while the A versus X war raged on, as even though his mind had been wiped by Emma, the X-Men still saw him as a threat. Shaw ended up escaping, and we finally got to see Madison suit up in some box armor again for the first time in forever as he tried to take on Shaw mano a mano. Shaw bested him, but in the end, Tigra and Madison were convinced that he actually didn't mean any harm anymore, and that he has maybe turned over a new leaf, and they let him and the Academy X kids go choose their own fates. Then, Madison disappeared for a while, until he turned up as one of the hostile mutants who was camping out at the now-destroyed Utopia. The time-displaced X-Men and Magic were sent to check out some disturbances there when the group of hideouts revealed themselves. A brief skirmish happened between everybody, but in the end, the Utopians, as they called themselves, just said they wanted to be left alone in peace, and the X-Men couldn't see anything wrong with that, so they sent them to Cyclops' new Xavier school in Canada, where I guess they hung out for a while. I don't know, that storyline really didn't go anywhere at all. The last real X appearance for Madison happened during the Age of X-Man event. Madison and mutants from all over were fighting the superpowered X-Man and Legion and their heralds when everybody was suddenly shunted into an alternate reality as created by X-Man. In this world, Madison was a history teacher at the Summers Institute for Higher Learning, where he encouraged his students to learn about their past. When Rockslide started questioning him about inconsistencies in the texts, Madison urged him not to think about things too much, and then suddenly gave him a book that should answer all of his questions. How very convenient. After he was brought back to the 616, Madison hung out with Riri Williams and a bunch of Iron Man friends where they were trying to find Tony Stark, but just ended up tracking down a bunch of AI robot villains that were fashioned after some of Iron Man's greatest foes. We got to see Madison box armor up again for this battle, which seems to be a rarer and rarer occurrence for him these days. And then that pretty much catches us up to where we are today, where Madison and the other exiled mutants are joining Sabretooth in the pit. Now, about Madison's powers, they're all technology-based, meaning that he can effectively talk to machines and get them to do things that he wants them to do. It's kind of like that kid from Heroes who went to the ATM machine that time and took out a whole bunch of money just by asking it to give it to him. He can also reshape machinery into any form he wants it to take, and he can also manipulate it telekinetically so that it can fly through the air, which he sometimes uses as like a weapon. He's kind of like a mix of Forge and WizKid, though I'd say Madison's relationship with shaping technology and machinery is much more intimate. Whereas WizKid just reshapes the machine, Madison actually talks to it, which gives him a very special bond with it. And whereas Forge is gifted with intuitiveness of how to create things, Madison doesn't really have like that same sense of simply knowing what to do. He generally has to have an idea, then ask the machine to do it, and then the machine does it for him. It's more of a process with Madison than it is with Forge, but still, you can see where the similarities lie there. His greatest achievement is probably his box armor, which he can merge with psychically and consciously and physically. It gives him enhanced strength and durability and flight and all those other great things to have during a fight. He can technomorph parts of it into pretty much whatever he wants, like into weapons or a ship or even a big chair to sit on if the occasion calls for it. So, in considering Madison's power set and knowing what we know about his past, it's time to start thinking about what crime he might have committed that ended him up in the pit. It's obviously not anything that he had to do with the Neverland death camps that he helped to create, because part of the Krakoan Amnesty Treaty has wiped everyone's sins clean, so even though he was responsible for the death of many mutants, no one would still be holding that against him. Or would they? I partially wonder if the resurrected mutants who did die at Neverland might have had a bit of a bone to pick with him. We've already seen some resurrected mutants hold grudges against their killers, like when the resurrected Morlocks attacked Greycrow on the beach for his role in the mutant massacre. It's not too far a conclusion to draw that some mutants who died at Neverland would want Madison to answer for his crimes, even though he is technically supposed to be absolved of them. Even if that was the case though, and a bunch of mutants did attack Madison and he fought back, mutant versus mutant isn't breaking any of the Krakoan laws, so we probably have to look for something else for Madison's crime here. In keeping with the Neverland death camp theme, though, Madison could have tracked down the people who brainwashed him into creating the concentration camp in the first place, and maybe enacted his own form of revenge against them. Madison hasn't been particularly haunted by this experience for some reason, as the most we saw of him feeling tortured by it is whenever he was going crazy by himself somewhere in that Canadian factory. But, I mean, it's still got to eat at his conscience, right? It's definitely the most heinous thing he's ever been involved with, so if he did decide to revisit those ghosts from his past, he could maybe have broken the murder no man law, which of course would land him in the pit. Madison hasn't really given any clues in the Sabretooth series yet as to what it was that he did that got him sentenced to exile, but if those numbers on top of the prisoners' heads is any indication of something, then it might help to indicate exactly what law they broke. We already know that Necra murdered people, so the 2 might indicate the murder no man law. If that's the case, and Madison has a 3 over his head, then we can already rule out that he didn't kill anyone, and thus my first guess of his revenge against the Neverland camp officiators doesn't really fly. In the Sabretooth series, we learned that Melter, who also has a 3 over his head, has disrespected Krakoa, breaking the respect the sacred land law to land himself down in the pit. So if these numbers are indeed to indicate the law that was broken, then that means that Madison also broke the respect the sacred land law. The only thing I can think of is that maybe Madison tried to hack into the cybersecurity of the island that like Warlock and Cypher have kind of been toying with. I can't really think of a motive here, other than maybe he was wisening up to some of the shenanigans going on with Charles and Magneto and Moira, since this series takes place in the past. Maybe he started to investigate and he was getting closer to discovering Moira's no place, so they had to banish him as a nuisance. Madison can sense technology, and even though Moira's no place was off the grid, I wonder if he might have had a sense of all her technology down there and started digging a hole in Krakoa to it. I mean, what else could it be with Madison Jeffries and disrespecting the land? It's not like he's a litter bug or anything. I think Madison was closing in on some of the secrets that the inner Quiet Council was trying to hide, and so they found some excuse to get rid of him in like a scapegoat manner, and thus banished him to the pit. That's what you get for being such a nerd, Madison. So that's my not so little video on Madison Jeffries. I think he's such a handsome character and quirky, even though, I'll be honest, a lot of the stories that involve him are generally quite boring and hard for me to get through. I can really only take so much scientific jargon babble before my brain zones out and I decide to just look at all the pretty pictures instead. Let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts about Madison Jeffries or any ideas about what his crime might have been. I'm always curious to see what everybody else's theories are about things like this. Stay tuned for more videos focused on the other exiled mutants in the pit, and be sure to check out my channel if you're interested in watching a breadth of other X-related content like rankings and reviews and stuff. You can also check out my website for written blog posts, or follow me on social media for daily engagement with panel scans from various X comics from throughout the years. I want to thank you for stopping by and sharing some time with me today, and please be sure to come back again soon for more great X-Mentations.